of this system is to gain control over capital in order to centralize power. Basically, the game is to get rich. And here's how we do that. America holds the most powerful weapon in human history, which is the dollar, because the whole world has to use our dollars to buy their energy and to trade with each other. So we get to control the plumbing of the entire global economy. That is the fix superpower. Now, we use this superpower to crack other countries open so we can take their resources. And there's basically 4 ways to crack a country open, right? Number 1, you sanction it. Their economy collapses. In 2018, for example, the US pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. Now, countries like Germany, France, and Britain, they still wanted to keep trading with Iran. But the US basically said, but that's nice, but if you guys want access to the US financial system, you're gonna have to choose who you wanna do business with. So European companies started leaving Iran. Now, the second way to crack a country open is you cut it off from its bloodstream, which is access to the dollar. So their economy collapses. For example, in 1988, the United States basically told Panama, hey, that's a nice country you have there. It'd be a shame if the cash stopped moving here. So we froze their assets, we blocked payments, and we pushed money that was supposed to go to them into the Federal Reserve escrow accounts. And because Panama's economy relied on the dollar, their banks closed for 9 weeks because there wasn't enough cash and their economy was massively pressured. Now, the third way to crack a country open is you go to war with it. You pressure it long enough that will cause huge amounts of inflation, because war is always inflationary, so their economy collapses. And the people of that country will hate their leaders so much, they'll revolt against them. And when the time is right, we'll remove that guy from power and replace him with one of our own who's cool with us rebuilding there. Okay, the fourth way is the last resort. Takes the longest, and that is use the media and the capital to fund the opposition from inside that country to eventually push for a revolution in the name of good, right? In the name of democracy, in the name of human rights. And if that goes on long enough, you let the country tear itself apart from the inside. People revolt, right? They replace their leader themselves. The economy falls apart. 4 different ways of doing the same thing, which is to collapse an economy in order to get their resources privatized, sold off, and get them sucked into the financial industrial complex where more power and capital can centralize. This is why, unlike 99% of people in this world, we are able to park our money into the S&P 500 index, and assuming that we're sensible, right, we've saved enough and invested diligently throughout our lives, we get to retire fat and happy at the age of 67 as millionaires. Hold on though, where does this system get the money to do this, I wonder? Well, it gets it from you, from all of us, because we have been conditioned to persistently dollar cost average into the market, right? That is the heroes we prop up. That's who the media says we should look up to. And it is this very same market that rules over our political class. Because the true votes do not come from you voting at the voting booth. It comes from voting with capital. Now, most of us will never get those votes because we dollar cost average into what are called mutual funds, ETFs, target retirement funds, right? Places that forfeit those voting rights to the BlackRocks, the State Streets, and the Vanguards. Those votes get used to support these policies. Now, after those countries get vassalized and absorbed into the FIC, and we get richer, the machine rolls on to the next country, and then the next one, and the next one. Right, but the catch, though, is that not every country can be cracked. Some countries are really hard to take down. Some countries, for example, have very powerful allies who might have their back, right? Some countries are just really big, and they're self-sufficient, and they don't actually need the US. Maybe they don't depend on the dollar or on energy because they have their own. Some countries have nuclear weapons. Now, if the first 3 strategies don't work, then the 4th strategy of last resort is propaganda. That consists of using the media, the entertainment industry, culture, right, that tries to change the minds from the inside of that country to hopefully spark a revolution. That brings me then to Iran and the conflict that the machine is now in. The conflict of the machine is this. AI needs stability in the region. The forever war model needs war and instability. Iran knows that it has a lot of leverage here because even though they can't win the military war, they can wait it out long enough to collapse the global economy. They know that, which is why in a recent meeting with their leaders, they kind of embarrassed US leadership by just not showing up at all and having US leadership show up first, which in the game of negotiations is a big no-no. Now also, in this game where capital and centralization of power is the end goal, a collapse of the economy is the worst possible outcome. And it is obvious the Iranian leadership understands this, and that's why they've been putting out messages like this.
Both the ruling class, the military generals, your own government, the political leadership, and the head of the government, they are all just using you as human shields. The spiral of silence created is the result of a financial oligarchy.
Iran mentioned the financial oligarchy, which is exactly the system where capital sits above the government. Now, where does Israel play a role in all of this? Israel is the cover story for the US empire. Israel is the piece of the whole machine whose job it is to keep the world in conflict. Remember, the MIC, right, the military side of this, they only make money when there's a war, right? Weapons to sell and cities to rebuild. And somebody has to fight. And in the most resource-rich, most strategically important region on the planet, that somebody has been Israel. That is their role. Israel keeps the Middle East unstable enough that the forever war model never runs out of customers. But at the end of the day, this can't go on forever. Something has to give. The model of making money from war will inevitably end, one way or another. But that is why we're seeing money move from the war model to the build-out of the last technology humans will ever need to build, which is robots and AI. And in order to transition this money from one place to the other, you need an exit strategy, you need a face to represent the movement, and you need on-brand messaging from everyone. That's what we're watching right now. We are watching that exit strategy play out. That is why we're seeing the coordinated public criticism of Israel from people who would have never criticized Israel before. All that criticism gives us the exit narrative. Everyone is now on the same page if you haven't noticed. But we also need a face that will allow us to transition the model to AI. And the candidate that best represents the interest of the technological industrial complex is J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance's entire political career was essentially launched by one man. Right, that man's name is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel spent around $15 million for Vance's Senate run, which is one of the biggest bets on a Senate candidate ever made. J.D. Vance worked inside of Peter Thiel's world. Peter Thiel was the guy who helped get him into Trump's orbit in the first place so that he could become VP. That's not a theory. This is all on record. Now, J.D. Vance doesn't have a lot of competition. He is the clearest political embodiment of the tech world that exists in power today. So now we have an exit narrative where everyone's on the same page. We have a face that represents the movement. And he's also on board with criticizing Israel, right? All of it is consistent with this story. If you wanted to transition from wars to AI, you'd take your guy, you would distance him from this forever war model, you'd let him look strong and independent by standing up to Israel in public, which is exactly what we're watching him do right now.
If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
That's how you'd set him up to be the face of the New World Order heading into 2028. That is how the technological industrial complex becomes the power player. That's how we usher in this digital control grid. So let me tie all of this together. Remember the three power structures from Simon Dixon: the FIC, the MIC, and the TIC. Right, for the last few decades, the financial industrial complex used the military industrial complex to run this forever war model because war was the most profitable product in the world. War means more weapons contracts, emergency budgets, sanctions, oil shocks, reconstruction deals, and of course, more and more debt. Now, the MIC created the need for war using its proxies, right? Good cop US, bad cop Israel. And the financial industrial complex financed all of it. But now the product is changing. The new king on the block is going to be the TIC, the technological industrial complex. They want to build out AI, data centers, robots, surveillance, chips, energy, digital infrastructure. That is where the money's going right now. But this creates a problem because the old model and the new model want opposite things. The MIC needs chaos and forever wars, and the TIC needs stability because you can't build a $1 trillion AI grid in a world that is always on fire. Data centers need power, right? Supply chains that work, energy markets that work, shipping lanes that stay open. So what we might be watching is not America versus Iran or Israel versus Lebanon. We are watching a civil war inside the profit machine itself. Two factions of the same system fighting over which business model will run the future. This is where Simon Dixon says, look at who's funding these operations. Right at the top you have Gulf capital, which are countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, countries with giant sovereign wealth funds that need places to invest trillions of dollars. Well, then you have the financial industrial complex, which are the banks, the asset managers, private equity, old banking families, the Western financial system that can turn all of this into investable products like bonds, stocks, loans, insurance contracts, infrastructure funds, yield, right? Well, then you have the technological industrial complex who also funded Trump's election. People like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Silicon Valley. And this is all done in order to transition from the old war model to building AI, robots, satellites, data centers, and the surveillance side of the system, the digital control grid. Well, then, of course, you can't leave out the military industrial complex, which was that old war economy, which are the defense contractors, the weapons lobby, right? And the Israel First donors, represented by people like Miriam Adelson. That is the old model in conflict with the new. So now the question is, well, who's winning? Right now, it looks like the Gulf, the financial industrial complex, and the technological industrial complex. They're trying to move the region toward stability. Because again, stability lets them build and own the future. Now, while that's happening, though, the military industrial complex will still benefit from the chaos, because chaos keeps their model alive. That's what the Iran conflict represents. Now, Iran does not need to win the conventional war. Iran is convincing the world right now that the future is going to be cheaper with them inside the system. And Iran has the geography, they have the energy, and the choke point to leverage themselves into this bigger future, to be part of that deal. Now, China's role in this is they're the factory of the world, the manufacturing base, right? The infrastructure, and the alternative payment rails based on gold. Now, the Gulf has the money. The West, for now, still has the financial wrapper. But ultimately, an agreement will be reached because ownership and rebuilding is a lot more profitable right now than war. You can only bomb somebody once. But if you finance the rebuilding, you own the ports, you insure the ships, you control the payment rails, you run the data centers, you reroute their energy, collect interest rates for the next 30 years. And that's a way better business model. That's the transition away from war as a service to infrastructure and AI as a service. And that is why I believe that in the near future, Israel's leadership will probably be changed. Its resources will be privatized, and it too will be absorbed into this profit machine. The leaders of the old forever war model will be replaced with new ones. And we will get whatever narrative they'll negotiate. That's where I think this is going. Now, if you're interested